Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video after so many years of not putting my voice anywhere on YouTube other than my song covers. So this video is not about tarot card reading, it's not about telling you how to get a good GPA, it's not telling you about something informative about home university, but instead of home university, I'll be sharing with you my exchange experience in Hong Kong. So I have been in Hong Kong for 4 months and I was out of Singapore for 4 months. So with that, let us cover on what is an exchange program and why you should do it or not to do it. So before I start the video, this video is not sponsored or endorsed by any institution mentioned. This video is based on my personal reflection of my own experience for the past 4 months, and this context of the video is more relevant to Singaporeans or anyone who is studying in Singapore universities. With that, let's look into what I'm going to cover. I will introduce myself again if you do not know who I am. I'll be explaining what is ISEP, so this is an exchange program, why I chose Hong Kong, why I stayed in a country for 4 months in Asia and not Europe or America, why I chose to study in the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, also known as PolyU for short, why I chose to enroll in the university, what I studied in the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and overall what are my experiences regarding school life, workload, transportation, food, beverages, and even cultural aspects. So hopefully I could get this straight on the point without trying to ramble or trying to be talking nonsense. I also will talk about what I took away from the exchange program, so aka this is about the learning points, and lastly this is something that you want to know, which is whether going for an exchange program, is it worth going? So this is my recommendation verdict. With that, let us start on the introduction. So my name is Crissie. I'm currently a year 4 student at Singapore Management University, also known as SMU. So I'm studying Bachelor of Science Information System program, where I double major in Smart City Management and Technology, which is now currently merged into information system major, but I was enrolled into the smart city management and technology major before this revamping happened within the School of Computing and Information System. And apart from studying smart city management technology, I also did a second major in business analytics. So I had both the background of knowing what is a smart city management and technology and what is business analytics. And also I will talk more about what I also did. So prior to the creation of this video, I completed 30 credits in SMU. I also took 1 credit in SUTD, and I intended to take home, which actually my exchange program had ended, so I decided to do 4 credits in my exchange program, and I'm currently awaiting for the result, which only released in mid-January next year. So with that, what is ISEP? So ISEP is an international student exchange program, which is why the acronym called ISEP. So you spend 1 academic term abroad, and the intention is to broaden your life experience in a different country and culture. So according to my school, SMU, it claims that it actually allows students to choose more than 220 partner universities worldwide, and you can earn up to 5 academic credits towards your degree program. But the 5 academic credits, it's very specific depending on the course you are in your home university. So if you are trying to do exchange, bear in mind you have to go and check your degree handbook to see what kind of baskets or the kind of curriculum things that you need to clear, because if not, your credits can't be transferred properly from the exchange program, and you might waste your time if you do not plan properly. So this is something that you have to bear in mind when you want to do exchange program outside of Singapore, and so does trying to do a local exchange in Singapore, which is also known as SUSEP, which is stand for Singapore University Student Exchange Program. Yep. So why Hong Kong? So firstly, I have been to Hong Kong many times in the past when I was a child. My last visit to Hong Kong was during the summer this year, where I visited with my mother and my sister to do ground surveying on PolyU. And prior to the visitation to Hong Kong this year, my last visit was 10 years ago. Exactly 10 years ago in 2013, when I went on the school trip with my secondary school Chinese orchestra to visit the Hong Kong Cultural Centre to know more about the Hong Kong Chinese Orchestra, as well as we played a lot of like Disneyland, Ocean Park rides. We went to Tsing Yi, I still remember City Gate. So it's so long, but you get what I mean. My main point is that I have visited the place so many times in the past. And second part is Hong Kong offers the best of both worlds. So what I mean by best of both worlds, we can see that Hong Kong is influenced by the West, given that they were colonized by the British until the handover in 1997, and afterwards they are under they are the special administrative region under the People's Republic of China, which in Hong Kong they call it mainland China. So you can see the world of both the past and the present coming into one Asia's world city, which is Hong Kong. And this is something that is very interesting for Hong Kong, and I will cover more when we talk about the overall experience. And lastly, this is my personal take. Firstly, I am unable to drive. I don't have a driver's license, so for me, I rely very heavily on public transportation, which is why for me I decided not to go to places like United States of America, which relies heavily on relies heavily on using private transportation like cars, because you need cars to travel long distance in America, and for Europe because it's also very far as well. I know they have good efficient public transportation as well, but also because of the cost, I felt that it was not something in mind that I would go to. Also, yeah. So hence I landed on Hong Kong because of the public transportation, which I am very familiar with, particularly their mass transit railway, also known as the MTR. So next, why PolyU? So again, as I mentioned, PolyU stands for the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So why I chose PolyU is because firstly, it offers various disciplines that my home university does not offer. For example, my university does not have tourism and hospitality management, and it doesn't have things like optometry, science, because my university is a management university in the first place. So one thing to also note is that PolyU is also focusing a lot on trying to serve society and needs. So hence a lot of their courses that they offer is more towards trying to help people. So they take pride in trying to help Hong Kong in particular, because this is in Hong Kong setting. And also lastly, PolyU is located in the city center. So the definition of city center might be different for countries, but I would say that city center would be something that is my perspective is something that it's convenience and efficiency. So I think convenience is more important because I like to travel and see things. If I stay somewhere far away from the city area, it's very difficult to go to the main happenings. So for me, city center means to know about the main happenings. And PolyU is actually situated in Kowloon, Geelong. So this is actually a very center part of Hong Kong, and it's going, if you look at the map, it's actually going downwards of Hong Kong Island. So it's actually, if you travel from PolyU to maybe let's say the central, it takes about 20 to 25 minutes from the via the MTR. So that is actually, I would say, it's very convenient. It's actually quite short distance. So that is something that I had in mind when I decided to go to the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Okay, so what I studied in PolyU. So I took 4 subjects in PolyU. So they are, bear in mind, they are credit bearing and they can be counted towards my degree. Just need to pass or fail. You still get the external grade, but it will be converted to a pass or fail. So that's how overseas exchange program works in Singapore. So the first subject that I took is actually called the Exploring Language in Social Life. So this subject is offered by the English department in PolyU. So it leans more on the socio-linguistic areas. So socio-linguistic areas is something that is particularly interested in languages that are used in life and languages used in conversations in particular, especially in different settings like hospital, business, schools. So this subject is very cultural, but it was very meaningful for me because I don't have linguistic field of study in my own home university, and this was something that I am very interested in because I like to learn about people's life. I like to know about people's, how they use languages in their daily life, how they interact with each other, and why languages are seen as high status, low status. So this is, high status means that a language itself is seen as very important and it's good for the economy. Like example, English. English is a global language that everybody uses for many years because it's the dominant languages, especially in like United Kingdom and United States of America. So this is something that I was very interested in, and that's why I took it. The second subject is called the Digital Transformation in Tourism and Hospitality. So what is this subject all about? So firstly, the key point here is digital transformation. So the intention is to understand technologies that could help transform tourism and hospitality, so like hotels and integrated resorts. So again, as I mentioned, I come from a management university. Obviously, tourism is not something that my university offers, which is also why I took it in PolyU, especially given that School of Hospitality and Tourism Management is actually one of the top few schools in Asia for hospitality. And this is something that I felt Hong Kong takes very keen interest in it because they rely a lot on tourism to make profits and to boost their country's name. So this was something I'm interested, especially I'm an information system student. So this course was something that I could take in order to clear into my degree progress. overall my experience with the course was very eye-opening, because this course was the only course that I interacted a lot with local and exchange students. And even we went on the field trip to Guangzhou and Shenzhen. It was my first time going to People's Republic of China. Very thrilling and also very shocking. So this is something that I will cover more in my overall experience, so hang there. The third course is Management and Organization. As an information system student, it's not my priority to really study on business courses, but again, because management organization is all about people, so therefore for me, learning this course would be very beneficial for me in terms of working world. So that is also why I chose to take it. To me, it was very boring because it's just me sitting in the lecture hall, listening to the professor what she had to say about the content, especially on what human resource, motivation, strategic management, and all that stuff. It's a very fluff subject, and for me, I find it very dull and very boring. But it's still overall eye-opener, because this is the only time where I can feel like, hey, I'm a business student in a school, rather than sitting in front of the computer and just trying to learn how to code. So yeah. And also there are tutorial classes, which to me also was a dull as well. So this is Management and Organization subject. And the last one, which also part of the Faculty of Business, is actually called the Artificial Intelligence and Big Data for Business. So this subject is trying to teach people how to use software to help business understand the context of the data, as well as to help them make decisions. And interestingly, this subject is weird because we are not encouraged to learn programming before we use softwares like Tableau and RapidMiner. For me as an information systems student, it was not difficult for me to grasp the concept of the technology. But for me, what I learned a lot from this subject is how people's perspective on programming. And I was a little bit shocked when I was told that I don't have to go so deep into the subjects, like what are the matrices for machine learning, and what are all the stuff that is important for programmers, because we are supposed to be business students, not computer science students. Shockingly also, this subject relies a lot on generative AI, and if you do not use generative AI, you are marked a little lower for the individual essay, which to me was a big change on my stand for generative AI. Yeah, because I felt very insulted that I scored lower than someone uses generative AI to do an essay. So these are all the subjects that I've taken in PolyU. They are good and bad, but I suggest that if you are going to choose a subject to take in exchange program, I highly recommend to look at the syllabus outline and to see if those courses can be taken in Singapore. And if Singapore doesn't offer, this is something that you can consider to do at the exchange program, because I believe that you should go to an exchange program to study things that Singapore doesn't offer, like the country does not offer those kind of subjects. Or if you're just going to study something not on a serious level, then by all means go and take the subject in the university outside of Singapore. But my main thing I want to put here is that exchange is something that you should be going there to learn, to gain new perspective, to broaden your horizon of trying to prepare for a working world. So choose your subject wisely. With that, we are on to the overall experience, which unfortunately you have to listen to what I have to say. So bear in mind, let us go through what is the overall experience. What are my takeaways of the whole exchange of what I have learned during my time in Hong Kong, as well as PolyU. So for the first start, I will be talking about my school life and workload. So I would say that workload wise was relatively manageable compared to Singapore education. I feel that PolyU itself, overall, as long as your English is fluent on the level of proficiency of a fluent speaker or native speaker, I don't think it will be an issue for you to excel in the subjects, because the standard in Hong Kong is a bit different from Singapore. In Singapore, I would say that most of the subjects I get would be around B, but here I get A- quite easily as long as I put in my best and effort. So I say workload wise was manageable for me. And I felt one thing interesting here about PolyU is that they encourage a lot on teacher-students interaction. I notice how students go to professors very easily to ask questions compared to being in Singapore, where every time when the lesson's over, I just pack my bags and just leave the classroom and just never talk to the professor ever again until the time comes. Here I felt like because of that interaction between the student and teachers, it makes it more friendly, fun, I guess. Not so serious with work. As long as they said that it's about learning. Yeah, it's just learning. You're here to just learn those stuff. So I would say overall, teachers and student interactions are really interesting. It's good. But there are downsides where the whole thing feels unserious. Yep. So the third point I have is on classroom. It's taught in English, but surprisingly, given that Hong Kong frequently uses Cantonese in their daily life, I also noted that you can apparently ask teachers, professors, questions in Cantonese or Mandarin Chinese, which shocks me because in Singapore we often ask questions in just English. It's not in the habit for us to ask questions in mother tongue unless the subject is taught in mother tongue language. Then you have to ask questions in mother tongue. But here I felt that they just ask in whatever language they are comfortable with, which again I feel like it hinders the students from trying to practice English. If they are trying to prepare the students for working world, I feel that they should not allow for students to ask questions in a language that it's not English. So this is something that I saw and I notice whenever I am in class or after class. Okay, so the next point I want to talk about, I have already mentioned about generative AI in the subject Artificial Intelligence and Big Data for Business. I was quite surprised because I always felt that to encourage students to use generative AI is actually very damaging to the students, because firstly, the students won't be able to create, to increase that creativity, to really come up with ideas, to really improve on trying to use the language to write their essays or to do something. I mean, I know that generative AI, you can just use it to go and research, use generative AI to re-paraphrase sentences in your essay or to make your resume sound nicer. But I feel that their encouragement is pushing students to the extent that it's creating an over-reliance on the technology in order to do just a very basic work load. So this is something that I am shocked. I think that the guideline for using generative AI needs to be improved. And this is also something quite similar back in my home university as well, that there's a need for guidelines. So this is probably something new, maybe because I started my year 4 in a country outside of Singapore, so I'm not very familiar if this is something that is prevalent happening in my own country as well. But I still strongly discourage students from being over reliant on generative AI to do a basic workload. So my next point is also about the food. I found that so far the food is very affordable, and given because PolyU is situated in the city area, the pricing is very similar to the pricing back in my home university. So I would say it's still relatively good, and there's not much difference in terms of how I choose to eat in school, like, because since the prices are very similar back in my home university. The next up, I didn't join any co-curricular activities, but I do join activities like, for example, Beverages International. So Beverages International, it's another name for Campus Crusade in Hong Kong, but they are predominantly focused on trying to gather Christians from countries, especially for people who are not having any local church or Christian community, and they want to feel at home, particularly for English language. So I joined Beverages International, and I felt at home in some sense because I'm doing something that is very similar to what I do in Singapore in terms of growing in faith. But overall, I think PolyU, I would say the way they operate their activities club is also very different, because given of the national security concerns and other matters, there's no student body that is controlling the clubs. So I heard in PolyU and maybe some other Hong Kong university, it's hard to create CCAs for to get an approval because of this new rules. There's no CCA, the kind of student body that in charge of trying to get the formation of the activity club. So yep. And lastly, students were very friendly and polite. I feel that I was noticing this difference between Singapore and Hong Kong. I felt that when exchange students come to Singapore, I felt like I don't really interact much with the exchange students, given that they have their own community, and so does Singaporeans as well. We have our own community, so hence therefore there's this barrier that we don't really try to break to make others feel at home. And we don't really know much except that they are exchange students. But here in PolyU, and I think for most places in Hong Kong universities, they tried their best to integrate us into their school life, so they make us feel very normal. And this is something that I have to give credit to, because it's not easy to talk to people outside of just speaking Cantonese with your own local community, or just maybe to speak Mandarin Chinese. So I'll give credit to that for trying to make us feel at ease, for making us feel at home in PolyU during the 4 months of exchange. So this is the wrap up of my school life and workload in Hong Kong. For transportation, I use MTR more frequently because it brings me directly to the places that I wanted to visit, particularly food places. I also use Octopus card for most of my traveling, and interestingly, Octopus card can be seen as something like an EZ-Link card, so you can top up your money via top up machine or convenience stores. You can top up as much as Hong Kong dollar 500 to 1,000. It can be used in most food places, convenience stores, even small shops, because Octopus card is basically like a debit card itself. And there's a lot of perks and benefits if you use Octopus card in Hong Kong. But also, given the fact that I initially started off using Octopus card on Apple Pay, I found that the payment terminal used in Hong Kong is not as good as Singapore. In Singapore, if you use like Apple Pay, you can just hold your phone whichever ways and angle, and you can still get your payment to go through. But in Hong Kong, it seems like I noticed that my phone is unable to get the card approved and all that. So it was so hard using Octopus card on Apple Pay and even on the MTR as well. And that caused me a lot of issues, especially when I'm still inside the gantry and I'm not out of the gantry. So there was this experience where I was trying to travel to Central and I had my Octopus card in the Apple Pay. But the problem was that my phone, I tried to activate the Apple Pay and the gantry sensor wasn't able to feel or sense the card inside. It was so embarrassing because I was standing right at the gantry and I couldn't come out of the gantry. It's just an Apple Pay. And this service staff even thought maybe I was skipping the money or I entered illegally. I had to tell her in Mandarin Chinese that I came from Hong Ham, which is the MTR stop for where PolyU and my dorm is located. So she allowed me to leave with her own card, like a free access, but obviously I do not know whether my money is really deducted because the card wasn't working. But thankfully the payment system for the public transport on MTR is very different from Singapore. So I think it's cool, but it's scary. It's also particularly a reason why I decided to revert back to using physical card instead to avoid getting into trouble. The next up is that the directions in MTR. I found the directions to be very confusing, especially with all the escalators pointing to exit, but actually they did not point me to the concourse. Instead, they are actually pointing me to go to another line, which is actually a struggle because I wasted 5-6 minutes of my life in MTR stations. Especially exiting MTR is such a struggle because whenever I'm rushing to go for a dinner reservation or to go to a cinema, MTR stations are so cramped, densely populated. It's so hard to move smoothly just to go to a place. So this was a real big struggle, especially when the exits are actually showing the same road. So there's no landmark for me to know this exit is going to where. For example, I was at Tsim Sha Tsui. Tsim Sha Tsui has so many exits, around like 6 exits. And they all pointed to going to Nathan Road. And Nathan Road in Singapore context is something like Bukit Timah Road. So it's a long stretch of road. I'm like, so they are going to Nathan Road, but what is the landmark? Like what, like when I come out from the exit, how is it different? How is this exit different from another exit since they are Nathan Road? There's no indication, and it's so hard to find a board. I know there's boards like telling you which direction, but in a very crowded place, peak hour, and so cramped, it's very hard to like find your way out if you're trying to like the mentality is to get out of the MTR. So this is something I find very confusing and it sucks. So because of that, usually what happens is that even if I find the correct exit, it's usually like it's either you get a further walking distance or you go to the wrong directions, and you have to rely so much on Google Maps just to find one way. And by the time when you come out from the building, you realize, oh damn, that exit is nearer than the one that you just exited. Well, that's Hong Kong life for you if you take MTR. And also another point is that I hated how the MTR space is not fully utilized, especially in the peak hour. So my experience with it is that whenever I wait to go into the MTR train, people usually stand in the center of the train, like they just stand right in front of the door instead of queuing properly. And by the time when the train comes, the door opens, what happens is that the people will just go in and they don't move in. Like basically they just move in and just stand in the center of the train. Like, hello, like there's other people trying to go into the train too. It's not just you. Yeah, basically there's this kind of like mentality that they are worried that they missed a stop. So it sucks because there's so many people, the train has so many spaces, and it could be fully utilized, but oh well. And that causes some people like myself to sometimes miss the train because of that mentality. Yep. And this is something that I have about the public transportation, particularly the MTR, and hopefully this is something that could be improved, perhaps maybe because I am a foreigner living in Hong Kong, and also maybe this is culture differences as well. So yeah, I think this could be improved, and this is something that that could be changed over time in next 20 years or so. Okay, so for food and beverages, just now I was mentioning about school life, but this in context is more on what I do outside of school. So firstly, I think that the food was not an issue. I think the price in Hong Kong for food is relatively more affordable than Singapore, because Singapore you are paying for the good service tax and service charge, but in most places I have been to and eaten in Hong Kong, they don't really have service tax, so this is awesome. And also the currency exchange as well, the rate is good. I also saw a lot of Chinese cuisine. In particular, when I say Chinese cuisine, I mean Chinese cuisine like coming from parts of mainland China, and yeah, like Sichuan cuisine, Hunan cuisine, those kind. So there's a lot of such cuisines in places, especially in the area that I was living in. And in order to get authentic like Hong Kong local food, it requires a lot of planning and traveling, because they take you a while to just find that kind of like the authenticness. And as mentioned, the MTR itself is such a struggle, so really that you have to put a lot of energy and effort to try to travel and get the authentic local food. I also found that some restaurants in Hong Kong as well, particularly those atas, or another word is fancier, require reservation, which is quite common compared to Singapore, where you just walk in and you hope that you get a table, or or that you just wait in the long queue. Because I have this experience where I was going to a restaurant that was selling authentic Singapore food. I was going to this restaurant to eat with my roommate and her friend, and this waiter was asking us if we have reservation, even though there were like 5 tables that were not occupied, and they are asking us if we have reservation. So obviously reservation in some ways is very important if you go to Hong Kong. No matter whether if there's long queue or no long queue, it's best to go and make a reservation so that you can say, hey, I have reservation. There's no way for them to kick you out of the queue. So this is something to take note. So for food and beverages, I also go to like supermarkets because they have a lot of affordable food as well. My go-to grocery shopping is supermarkets like Park and Shop and the marketplace because they have everything that I needed. Likewise, I do buy microwave food because I do not know how to cook. And it's so embarrassing to say that, but overall I survive and thrive on microwave food because it's easy to prepare, and I bought them in case I couldn't go out for dinner because of like school workload, my laziness, or I just don't feel like going out at all. So I thrive on eating microwave food, especially from IKEA. I love it so much. You can find IKEA meal at K11 Art Mall if you are going to PolyU. I admit that Hong Kong definitely wins in terms of non-local food, particularly Western food. I find that restaurants that don't sell Hong Kong food, usually the Western food side, that kind of like food, it's always very authentic to that certain country culture. So one of my favorite places that I like to eat is called Caliente. It's one of the best Mexican tacos places in Tsim Sha Tsui, and they sell very good Mexican tacos that feels very authentic, and this is something that I don't see in Singapore. Singapore, there's not a lot of places that sell like Spanish food or Mexican food, unlike like French, Korean, Japanese. So this is something that Hong Kong definitely wins. Yeah, and likewise, as I mentioned, that Octopus card on Apple Pay is actually quite useless. I highly recommend also to keep at least one physical debit card on yourself in the event of the contactless payment via phone doesn't go through. So yeah, so this is something bear in mind for food and beverages, and even for grocery shoppings or convenience stores. Now, culture. So I have break down parts of culture based on like nature, architecture, language, and religion. So for nature wise, obviously Hong Kong has more natures compared to Singapore. One of the best things I have seen was actually the Tai O village. So Tai O village is actually located quite far end of, I wouldn't say quite, it's at the far end of Hong Kong. It's nearer towards I believe it's the Lantau Island, or nearer to Yuan Long, that side. So if you scroll on the map, you will see quite a vast big ocean surrounding Tai O village. So Tai O is like a fishing village far away from the city area, and a lot of people there, they thrive on traditional doing. They thrive on fishing. They thrive on, I can't really remember, but I think they are famous for seafood. And I love it so much there because it's so localized that it feels like you're really experiencing the authenticness of the Hong Kong that is already been quite gentrified by the mainland Chinese influence. So one thing I did at Tai-O village, there was this shop that was located quite a little far end from the area, from the happening area. Is this lady selling sauces, mainly XO sauces. So I bought 1 jar of XO sauce from her. And bear in mind, if you want to go Tai-O village, it's best to go in groups, because from groups you can get to join so many different like workshop tours. Like we did a workshop on trying to make a dried duck egg yolk that you can bring home to cook in soup or noodles. And also we managed to go through some long walks hiking, and if you go on the top of the hill point, you can see a bridge of the Macau Hong Kong Zhuhai Bridge, I believe. It's the bridge that is so long that you can just travel to by car to Macau and to into parts of the China. So interesting. It's so long, marvelous. So this is something that obviously Hong Kong, it's very interesting. Also, you can try to go to the peak as well. Very touristy, but the peak itself, you can see the sunset from the concourse if you come out of the tram, and you should catch the sunset around 5:45 p.m. It's really beautiful. Peak, if you go to the peak, if you go there, you can use your octopus card to pay for the entry and exit, like exit aka return ticket. So it saves your time. It also saves you the trouble of trying to buy tickets, because octopus card is the fastest way to get into the peak. So this is something on the nature. Architecture, I'll say that definitely Hong Kong has a mixture of the old and the new buildings. I feel like in Hong Kong it's very common to see old buildings. I suspect it's because of the symbolism and meaning to the locals. Definitely one of the highlights of the architectures in Hong Kong is actually the neon lights that's so bright it shines in your face. So this is something that they are very proud of. It is very Hong Kong. I heard also that neon lights are make way for LED lights because of safety reason. So this is something that you can see in Hong Kong that you probably won't see in Singapore. And in Singapore, most of the old buildings have always been revamped or demolished to make way for the new buildings. So this is something, as a Singaporean, looking at architecture is a must to see, and it's also a delight to see. Language. As a Singaporean myself, and as a ethnicity which is Chinese, I tend to make the mistake that most Singaporeans, like most of us, would probably say we speak Chinese or we know Chinese. But in Hong Kong, to tell people that you know Chinese, they might think, or some might think, that you speak Cantonese. So as a Singaporean, it's best not to refer Chinese as Chinese, like 华语. You're supposed to say 普通话. So this was something that I keep making a mistake on, and it has caused me quite a lot of trouble and inconvenience in my conversation because people thought I could speak Cantonese. So this is something bear in mind, not to tell to a local, especially when Chinese is actually in reference to Cantonese. And this is also very prevalent in most of the YouTube videos out there who say that they are speaking Chinese, but actually they are speaking Cantonese. So this is something I'm very concerned about, and I try not to say I speak Chinese, like use a proper terminology like Mandarin Chinese. Hence, and also since I can't speak Cantonese, and I also can't really speak proper Mandarin Chinese, I would say it's best to stick with using English, because I would rather not butcher the Cantonese or Mandarin Chinese, and respect the language itself. If you try to pronounce a word in Cantonese wrongly, like the likelihood of getting this idea that you are from mainland China, it's going to happen most of the time. Like for myself, when I was in a convenience store, I told the staff member I wanted to use octopus card in Cantonese, and because I pronounced it wrongly, she thought that I was a mainlander Chinese, which yikes, because I'm a Singaporean, I rather be associated to the correct country rather than the wrong country. So this is something that best to take note. If you can't speak Cantonese, just stick to English. Or if you can't speak Mandarin Chinese, just stick to English. It's the safest language ever. But one thing good about language wise, I did went for free Cantonese class to learn some useful phrases, words and numbers. And although I have mentioned that I can't speak Cantonese, but because of going to a free Cantonese class, I was able to pick up important sentences in order to get my food and to survive in my exchange. So if you want to actually learn some useful phrases or just to understand a bit of how the locals do, I would suggest to actually go and take a Cantonese class. And for me, my free Cantonese class came from Beverages International actually, and the people who taught Cantonese were really good, and I had like 8 worksheets of it, so they were very useful, particularly to learn the numbers. So you can hear the queue number in the PolyU school canteen, as well as to collect your food. So the last part, religion. I am a Christian. I attend a Methodist church in Singapore, but there aren't a lot of, I would say, Methodist churches that really fit me in Hong Kong, because if you go to most churches in Hong Kong, they are mostly in Cantonese, and I would say if you are growing life together with people, most likely you hear more on Cantonese or maybe Mandarin Chinese. And also the fact is that there also aren't a lot of Christians in Hong Kong compared to Singapore. Therefore, I don't have the chance to join much activities to understand how Christianity or how God works in Hong Kong. But thankfully, because of the church that I go to, I was able to partake in the services and to able to grow and mature in Christ. So if you are an exchange student or incoming exchange student that is going to Hong Kong, but you do not know what church to go to, I highly recommend attending this church called the Ambassador International Church at Conrad Hotel. So the Conrad Hotel is actually located at Admiralty, and I suggest going for their services because not only do they have very fantastic worship team, they also are the kind of like haven for most of expats, people with family, or people who are more comfortable and at home with using English. And since the services are all in English, so you can be assured that you still feel at home and able to grow in Christ without feeling that you are unwavering or like stagnated. So I recommend going Ambassador International Church if you are a Christian coming to Hong Kong for exchange. So next up, what I took away from my experience in Hong Kong as an exchange student. So there are 3 key points that I actually thought of when I was trying to make this video. Is firstly, I learned to live like a local. So my main point here is that how do I live like a local is I tried not to mingle a lot with fellow Singaporeans, because I felt like if I am going to follow the group of my own kind, I would not probably come out of my comfort zone to experience and to get this worth of knowledge, life experiences of trying to understand how to think like the locals. So I also accepted that when I go to exchange, I have to learn to live with strangers from different countries, and even in Hong Kong, so that it really feels like I'm on an exchange. And that living like a local also makes you feel like you're actually maximizing the money that is put into investing in the 4 months of exchange. And just as how I was in Singapore, I like to explore things by myself, and this is what I did mainly in Hong Kong. And all the subjects that I have chosen to study in PolyU was actually by my own choice, and I wasn't influenced by other people to be convinced to take a subject. I also never rely on any explorer guide or to follow any typical touristy recommendation, because I felt that if I were to follow recommendation, it makes me feel like I wouldn't get a sense of living as a local. So I felt that as long as I knew how to use the transportation, maybe doing basic things like paying, getting the necessity, I can confidently survive in exchange. So that's how I learned to live like a local. So the second part is understanding and having sensitivity for people across different walks of life. So firstly, I noticed that most of the people that I have met, I've seen that come to Hong Kong, most of them, I believe like 70-80%, it's their first time coming to Asia. And therefore for them, coming to Hong Kong will be the first touch point of what it feel like to be living in an Asia country, as well as to fly to different parts of not just East Asia, but also to Southeast Asia. I learned that also not everyone has English as their native or first language. So I learned to be understanding of how people say words to express how they feel, how they actually try to communicate. And this is something that I learned. And from there, when you try to have empathy or sensitivity towards the people, you also get to learn how they do things as well. And this is something that I love so much about exchange, is actually to understand people from across walks of life, so that I can get a general sense of how people work, how they operate, what do they actually desire, what do they need. So this is something that I enjoy a lot when I was in Hong Kong for the past 4 months. And lastly, this is very patriotic, but I found that when I was on exchange, I feel that I appreciate Singapore so much as my home, because of firstly the convenience, efficiency, and the pragmatism that my country offers. And I'm very grateful to Singapore for allowing us as Singaporeans to be able to go out on exchange, thanks to good relations with countries, and also promoting so much of Singapore to people who do not know about Singapore. And surprisingly, I would say that the reception towards Singapore has been very positive. I'm very proud to share about my country to fellow friends that I made in Hong Kong, and also try to correct them if they get something wrong about the whole of what Singapore is. And from there, it's not just to appreciate Singapore as well, but also to appreciate how other countries, how they do things as well. And this is something very important about exchange. It's not just to stay in your community, but to also understand how people do things. I think this is something as Singaporeans, I feel that we should actually not just keep sticking to our own community, but to actually make friends and don't be shy about trying to be embarrassed or anything, because I'm pretty sure that other people would have felt embarrassed too, especially if when their native language isn't English. So I think that that's something that I appreciate a lot about my home country, as well as how I live my meaningful, fruitful life in Hong Kong. Which comes to my last part, where I recommend people to go for international student exchange program. Is it even worth going? So I'll say yes. I highly recommend you to go out on an exchange outside of Singapore if you are given the chance to do so. But if you are tied down by financial concerns, another alternative is to consider doing the Singapore University Student Exchange Program, which also gives you the chance to meet people and understand other people's university culture beyond home university. And as a SMU student, I have also seen people embark on overseas internship, community service and study mission, or overseas experience as well. So overall, going out of Singapore to do this kind of activities really widens your worldview. It also broadens how you actually think, and also makes you very global citizen of the world. And as a Singaporean, I felt like I'm very blessed to be able to do exchange both local and overseas. This is something I felt that it only can happen once in my lifetime, given that you are going straight into the working world very soon. As a year 4 student myself, I am graduating next year, so therefore this is the last exchange experience that I will have as a student in SMU. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to go outside of Singapore and make most of my education experience. And also I'm very proud of being a Singaporean. So after all the tough years of schooling, I felt like I was prepared to go out in the world. So I'm very grateful for the experience as Singaporean, as well as what my country has offered to all of us. I also believe that doing international student exchange program also opens doors, opportunity to meet people from other countries apart from your own, and to understand how their country works, like what is their culture, how people interact with each other, how do they see life, was their philosophy towards maybe like money, daily life, etc. And I believe that also through doing international student exchange program, it also improves on my networking. I feel that networking in exchange program is so crucial because you never know when you go to another country post exchange program, you have a friend that you can talk to, you can rely upon when you need anything. So this is something I felt overall. Networking helps to exchange culture, and also it helps to both sides. Is a win-win situation for your friend's country and your country. So overall, I would say international student exchange program is worth going, and it's very meaningful. It enriches your life in so many ways that you can only experience once in your lifetime as a young student. With that, I shall end this video. Thank you for watching, and if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so, and let me know what you think about this video of my experience in Hong Kong. And in general, I hope that this video does help you to see a bigger picture of what it is to go on an exchange program, and maybe you might want to consider study in Hong Kong or anywhere in the world, so long as you're interested to be a global citizen. With that, I shall end the video. Take care and have a good day.